When it's the 27th of January 2026, when did Guns N' Roses collapse? Or when did that... Hi. 27th of January 2026. When did Guns N' Roses collapse? Because I have been thinking about this over the past few days. I've been listening to albums of the 70s. I've been listening to UFO. I've been listening to early Deep Purple. I've been listening to a few things from the 70s and about how bands back then made an album once a year or once every 2 years. And they took 2 months in the studio. Bands tended to have good chemistry. They tended to churn out good albums. And I was just thinking too that I was thinking about Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses are one of my favourite bands for a very long time. I've got to stop saying that they are like my sentimental favourite, but they had it's a big depressing mess with Guns N' Roses. Big depressing mess, and Chinese Democracy, Axl's solo project, which took way too long to come out. In fact, Moby, the artist Moby, met with Axl in New York in around about 1999 or something, and he said, okay, so one thing we should do is we should get into the studio here in New York, and what we should do is tinker around for a month, maybe 6 weeks, with material that you presently have, and get some new material going. And whatever that we end up with after that six week period is a new album. And Moby was very excited about the idea. Axl wasn't, and the rest of Axl's camp was not excited either. And I think it's the best thing that could have happened. And name it the Axl Rose Project. But when did Guns N' Roses, because I've been thinking about this, I was thinking about how I love bands that churn out an album once a year, once every 2 years. I love that. Legacy bands, and that, well, okay, so, and of course I had all this in my head, Guns N' Roses. So you've got Appetite. You've got a very integral part of the band in Izzy Stradlin, who had a heavy hand in writing many of the melodies and all the rhythm parts, some of the riffs. Obviously, yes, Slash, a very big, heavy hand in it all, obviously, but Izzy Stradlin was responsible for much of the songwriting and the melodies, which made Appetite the album that it is. And also Steven Adler's swagger on drums. Steven Adler's swagger, but see this, I was thinking about this, and I've been thinking about this over the last couple of days, off and on. I was thinking, when did Guns N' Roses actually collapse and there was no return? I considered the new songs. The new songs are shit. They're awful. They're terrible. You've got that Old School, and you've got Absurd. I fucking can't stand Absurd. You've got Nothing, which I've listened to I think twice. I do not like it. You've got Atlas, which I don't like. You've even got a couple of other ones which I can't think of at the moment. I can't be bothered Googling them. The new songs have not much substance. So the new songs have not much substance. So what happened? When did Guns N' Roses collapse? And I pinpointed it when Izzy Stradlin left. uh, Appetite, great album. I have to admit I haven't heard it for a while, but in the break, when we're in the car and Guns N' Roses comes on in the car, we turn the volume up. I turn the volume up. Appetite, a fantastic album. And so were the Illusion albums, actually. So were the Illusion albums, but it was all one bundle. All one bundle. It's almost like they were one-hit wonder. Because everything that you hear on Illusion, they had most of that. All the tracks off the Illusion albums, they had 70 to 75% of that in the Appetite days. In fact, Don't Cry was one of the first songs written for Guns N' Roses, and You Could Be Mine was in there as well as November Rain, and I think as well as Back Off Bitch. And I think they even had The Garden and The Garden of Eden, the Appetite days. They had 75% of the Illusion album in the Appetite days, but Mike Clint said, we're going to leave this stuff until the next album. And so, and Izzy is there for the Illusion albums. And the Illusion albums, I do like. There was a point where I thought I didn't like half of the material on them, and I had a reassessment of them. I like the Illusion albums. I don't listen to them very often, but I like them. So you've got Appetite and you've got the Illusion albums with Izzy. And on the Illusion, Steven Adler is on much of Illusion. Oh, no. Because he was dabbling in a certain substance, and that prevented him from drumming properly, and I think he couldn't get through Civil War in the studio. So Matt Sorum, and I love Matt Sorum. I may even like Matt Sorum, but I like Matt Sorum a great deal. Now, that's the thing, is that Izzy Stradlin, although mostly in the background, was an integral part of the success of GNR. And I was just thinking on this. I was thinking about this, and I was like, when did Guns N' Roses collapse? They collapsed when Izzy left the stage. When Izzy Stradlin left, that was pretty much the end. And of course they brought in Gilby Clarke, who is adequate, competent on rhythm, but didn't contribute to anything. Did not contribute to anything. I never really overly liked Gilby Clarke. I never overly appreciated him. As for Richard Fortus, I did not like Richard Fortus' style when he first started with Axl. Did not like it. His style has changed over the years. I think he's much more competent now. He probably contributes. However, look, you've got the Illusion albums, and then you've got nothing else after that. And why is there nothing else after that? You've got the Spaghetti Incident, which I don't include. It's not a studio album. It's a bunch of covers. Izzy Stradlin leaves. Gilby Clarke comes in. Matt Sorum is in. The dynamic of the band changes. Why could they not get into the studio? And I think it had a lot to do with Axl's personality, and because Slash is a workaholic, and so is Duff. Matt was very keen. Gilby's along for the ride, and you've got Dizzy Reed, not forgetting Dizzy Reed. You've got... The thing is, I think there was a war and indifference of personalities, because in 1995, was it, when Slash wrote a bunch of songs. He took them to Axl. Axl said he didn't like them. And then Axl changed his mind and said he did like them, but Slash It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere as his first solo album, which, if Axl had been of a different mind, It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere may have been the next Guns N' Roses album. And then the album I actually went back to last night. I went back to last night just to verify for myself if I thought Ain't Life Grand. I'm not sure when it came out. It could have been somewhere around 97. I can't be bothered to look it up. Ain't Life Grand. When did that come out? I actually, the singer who features on the Ain't Life Grand album, not overly keen on him. He's too loud. It's too... Years and years ago when it came out, it took me a long time to get used to that album, and then I went away from it again. The Ain't Life Grand album, I'm not overly keen on. I think the singer is too loud. I think he's too boisterous. I much preferred the singer that was on 5 O'Clock Somewhere. He was very good, but at this point, Guns N' Roses has completely collapsed because you've got a clash of personalities. You've got Axl, who has this vision in mind. He's been Axl at that. I've worked out. It's probably it was likely mentioned in interviews at the time. I've worked out that Axl had a particular vision in his head that he wanted for Guns N' Roses, and I think he had frustration in finding those elements. I think that Slash, Duff and Matt would have... I think that if Axl had just conceded and went into the studio, they would have rocked out an album. They would have. But Axl was fixed on a particular idea, a particular vision of what Guns N' Roses should sound like, and that clashed with Duff and Slash and Matt. And Guns N' Roses essentially fell apart before the Spaghetti Incident was recorded. When the band does a bunch of covers, it can go either way. It's always like, why didn't you just do a studio album? And also because that vital element wasn't there. Izzy Stradlin, who had contributed heavily to most things on Appetite and to the majority of the Illusion albums. He was a primary songwriter, because after Izzy Stradlin leaves, no new material. None. Gilby Clarke isn't contributing to anything. Slash, yes, it's Slash. It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere. That comes out. It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere. Slash gets restless, does his solo album. At this point, Duff got into real estate, I believe, and he started doing courses so that he could understand the accounting side of the business, because GNR were being ripped off in a sense. But that's the whole thing. You get to 1995 and 2000, Slash is doing his thing quite happily. He's just doing it. Axl is in limbo land, wondering how to make another album, which shouldn't really be too difficult because he can just collaborate with... Because Duff released himself from the camp. I think Duff met with Axl and said, I'm out. And Slash just... I don't know if he met with Axl and said, I'm out, but he just got on with his own thing. And Matt Sorum dismissed as well. I think Matt Sorum may have went back to the Cult. But what you have is Axl, who is reflecting back on it. This is my own theory, this is my own thoughts of what I think happened. Axl went into a depression. He was on a confident high, thinking, okay, vision in his mind, in his head, of what he wanted. Guns N' Roses to be, or really what he wanted to do as a solo artist. And I think between 1995 and 2000, frustrations, Axl started getting very frustrated and probably depressed, searching for musicians that could fulfill this goal. He eventually found Tommy Stinson from The Replacements. I think Tommy somehow, I'm not Googling any of this stuff, I'm just going for what's in my head, because I consider myself a die-hard fan, and I'd lost touch with Guns N' Roses somewhere between 97 and 98, and then when I discovered the internet in 1999, there was a Guns N' Roses forum page, and it had all this news and everything, and that's the first time I found out about Chinese democracy. I was like, oh, Chinese, I regret clutching onto that. I clutched onto it, I regret clutching onto that. And so Tommy Stinson, Axl finds hope in Tommy Stinson, and there was this guy called John Frisch on drums, and there's also, he left because he came from a Perfect Circle, I think, and Brain, I never liked Brain, that fucking leather jacket. Drummers don't have a t-shirt on my drum. Brain on drums, Robin Fink on guitar, Buckethead on guitar, Dizzy Reed on keys still. There was like 3 guitarists at one point. Bumblefoot comes later. So you've got, who have you got on guitars? You've got to have a rhythm guitar as well. Who was who was on rhythm guitar? Can't remember. Someone not so important was on rhythm guitar for that era, and Tommy Stinson on bass, Robin Fink from Nine Inch Nails on guitar, Buckethead on guitar. Oh, was it Paul Tobias on rhythm? Apparently he had no stage presence, saw very little of him, but who took over from Paul Tobias? Gosh, I actually looked this up. Let me see if I'll actually look this up. Paul. Google shows Izzy Stradlin. Well, yeah. Look, I don't know. I actually don't know. It's important as unimportant. It's not overly important. Richard Fortus hasn't made. Richard Fortus is a very competent guitarist whose style Richard Fortus. Who's the rhythm guitarist too? Roses, rhythm guitarist, 2000. Yeah. Okay. It was Paul Tobias. Okay. It says Izzy Stradlin left in 91, but he did. Hang on. Okay, so let's just go back here. What was? So look, it was. It was Paul Tobias, right? So Axl gets these musicians together with this hope, this confidence that he can make the album that he wants to make, which really had nothing to do with Guns N' Roses at all. And then time passes, he becomes more frustrated because he wants this vision to be perfect. And there were, all those songs were, oh my gosh, this news is so old. Those songs were all there in 1997 actually, even probably in 98, because Oh My God came out in the End of Days soundtrack in 1999. Yeah, I suppose sometimes I wish I could forget this stuff. No, I don't. All this information is hardwired into my brain. You had that going on. So Guns N' Roses collapsed at this point. This is no longer. When Izzy Stradlin left the picture, Axl was really in trouble. And then Slash went on to new things. Slash had good band members, very good band members. And I think that Slash works very well with Miles Kennedy and Brent and Todd Dammit Kearns, and Slash with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators is a great band. However, the Volume 4, I like the first track and I don't like anything else. I just don't like anything else off that album. Axl is in a lot of dismay. Not in trouble. Axl actually wasn't in trouble. Axl's thing was that he was a perfectionist and wanted everything exact. And I think Axl could have even brought out his first solo album in 1997 or 98. That's when he could have brought out his first solo album, and a string of them. But when did Guns N' Roses essentially collapse? When Izzy Stradlin left. Izzy Stradlin left in 92. When our main collapsed, when did Guns N' Roses become incapable of putting out a fantastic new album? After Illusions. When did they become incapable? When did they become not capable of doing that anymore? When Izzy Stradlin left. When he left. Izzy Stradlin and the Juju Hounds. I'm going to go back to that album. I've never heard it properly. I have to admit, I've never heard it properly. So an integral songwriting part of the band leaves, and that's their crash. They don't recover from that ever. Gilby Clarke does not contribute, incapable of contributing in any way, and they managed to get into the studio to do the Spaghetti Incident, but after that, that's it. It's all finished at that point, completely finished, and you've got personality clashes within the band. Everyone's not really getting along. Axl has a particular vision of what he wants. It all goes around in a circle. Slash wants to do rock and roll. Duff wants to do rock and roll. Matt wants to do rock and roll. Axl has this other vision. Yes, it keeps going around in circles. So that was essentially the end of Guns N' Roses when Izzy Stradlin leaves in 1992. I think the bigger that Guns N' Roses were getting was dissettling to Izzy Stradlin. He was not really liking that so much. I think there were also other factors involved. And according to Izzy Stradlin, he was invited to the reunion in 2014. However, from what I heard somewhere, they didn't want to share the loot equally. They wouldn't share the loot equally. And yes, so Guns N' Roses as a band were finished up. Well, they came here to Sydney, 93 Eastern Creek, Sydney. Guns N' Roses were here. Gilby Clarke, very little stage presence. I've always loved Matt on drums. Gilby Clarke has very little stage presence. Izzy Stradlin had this cool, calm thing going on with him. Cool, calm, and an integral part of the songwriting. Yeah, and so once they finished the Illusion tour, so Off the Road in 94, which is essentially the end of Guns N' Roses. Yes, the Spaghetti Incident, it's a bunch of covers, that's what it is. Haven't heard it in years. It's a bunch of covers. It's not a studio album, it's just a bunch of covers. And that's it then. Guns N' Roses fall apart. That's it, it's over. So essentially it's over before the Spaghetti Incident. They just were capable enough of getting into the studio to record the Spaghetti Incident. That's about it. That's it. And will there be another Guns N' Roses album? There probably will eventually be. Will it be a hit? No. Will it be? I can't stand Frank Ferrara. Never liked him. Never, ever, ever liked him. Isaac Carpenter, I think, is a breath of fresh air. Can they write a great album without Izzy Stradlin? They probably can. They probably might be able to. Would a new Guns N' Roses album be relevant and rockin'? Based on the songs Absurd, Old School, Nothing, and Atlas. They're all terrible songs. Absurd is a reworking of Silkworms from everything's left over from Chinese democracy era. Everything's left over from that. It's depressing, actually. It's really depressing to think about in retrospect. And I'm glad I was very eclectic with my music back then because I was listening to other things. But it's a wasted era, a wasted time. And I think it just like 3 days ago it occurred to me that I was in the car driving to the country with my partner. She asked me something about me. She was asking me something about albums and whatnot, and then somehow I got on the subject and got on the GNR subject, which was a bit exhausting, but Guns N' Roses ended in '93. Songwriting capability-wise, they ended. When Izzy Stradlin left, that's when it ended. That's when it all finished. And I think Axl went through a big depression between '95 and 2008 or so. I think Axl was depressed and bothered by things and creatively frustrated, trying to do his solo album, hanging on to the name Guns N' Roses, but his solo album, and really, really struggled about how to make a record. Slash was gone, Duff has left the building, Matt is gone, and Axl struggles. Manages to get a group of musicians together who can tolerate his personality or blend with his personality, gel with him. And from what I've heard, Tommy Stinson led all the rehearsals. He led the rehearsals. So you have a bunch of musicians who have nothing to do with Guns N' Roses at all, and they're making music. They may not necessarily have even gotten on with each other. They were paid to be there, they were there, and really quite a depressing situation. And then so I think it was a depressing situation, a frustrating situation, all of it. Slash was getting on with his own thing. Duff was getting into real estate. I wanted to say that. Yeah, that was the collapse of Guns N' Roses.